welcome. It is 7:30 in the evening in India and we are back again with our spotlight on G20. It is a power-packed show today with news and views from the first G20 meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors in Bengaluru and the G20 Culture Working Group meeting in Khajuraho. I'm Manman Bhattacharya. Let's get started with the top stories. Two-day G20 meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors commences in Bengaluru. Deliberations on day one focus on international financial architecture, sustainable finance, infrastructure, financial sector and financial inclusion aimed at fostering global economic cooperation. Prime Minister Narendra Modi urges delegates at the first G20 meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors to focus their discussions on the most vulnerable citizens of the world and win back the confidence of the world through creation of an inclusive agenda. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman says that multilateral development banks need to be strengthened for attaining sustainable development goals and poverty eradication, highlights rising debt vulnerabilities in many countries, says managing global debt vulnerabilities would be crucial for the world economy. Formal deliberations conclude at the G20 Culture Working Group meeting in the ancient Indian city of Khajuraho. Delegates visit Adivarth Tribal and Folk Art Museum, which houses a rich collection of tribal and folk art and artifacts. Delegates will be taken on a jungle safari to the Panna Tiger Reserve on Saturday. The two-day G20 meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors started in Bengaluru today with a video message of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In his address to the delegates, he drove home the point that the discussions should focus on the most vulnerable citizens of the world, as only by creating an inclusive agenda will the global economic leadership win the confidence of the world. DD India correspondents Ajay Mishra and Aisha Khanam bring us this report from Bengaluru.
Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman warmly welcomed G20 finance ministers and central bank governors to their first meeting under India's G20 presidency in Bengaluru. The meeting started with a condolence message for the victims of the devastating earthquake in Turkey. While delivering a video message during the inaugural session of the meeting, Prime Minister Narendra Modi urged the delegates to focus their discussions on the most vulnerable citizens of the world and stressed that global economic leadership can win back the confidence of the world only by creating an inclusive agenda.
I would urge that your discussions should focus on the most vulnerable citizens of the world. Only by creating an inclusive agenda will the global economic leadership win back the confidence of the world. The theme of our G20 presidency also promotes this inclusive vision. One earth, one family, one future.
The Prime Minister emphasized the need to strengthen multilateral development banks for meeting global challenges like climate change and high debt levels. Citing the after effects of COVID-19 on the global economy, he said that rising geopolitical tensions, disruptions in global supply chains, rising prices, food and energy insecurity, and unsustainable debt levels are affecting the viability of many countries, and there is an erosion of trust in international financial institutions due to their inability to reform quickly.
Trust in international financial institutions has eroded. This is partly because they have been slow to reform themselves. It is now up to you, the custodians of the leading economies and monetary systems of the world, to bring back stability, confidence, and growth to the global economy.
The Prime Minister noted that India has created a highly secure, highly trusted and highly efficient digital public infrastructure in recent times, and its digital payments ecosystem like the UPI can be templates for many other countries as well.
In the world of finance, technology is increasingly dominant. During the pandemic, digital payments enable contactless and seamless transactions. However, some recent innovations in digital finance also pose risk of destabilization and misuse. I hope that you will explore how the power of technology can be used for good while developing standards to regulate its possible risks.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman urged the G20 leaders to explore holistic solutions to pressing global economic challenges.
Supporting the countries most in need and reflecting the concerns and aspirations of developing countries will be central to our efforts. We will work closely with the Troika, the G20 membership, international organizations and guest countries to carry forward the exemplary work of G20 presidencies before us.
Reserve Bank of India Governor Shaktikant Das, who is the co-chair of the meeting, delivered the vote of thanks. He cautioned that while the world economy may have avoided deep recession, yet uncertainty lies ahead. He urged the leaders to promote global economic cooperation.
At the G20 meet of Finance Minister in the IT city Bangalore, digital public infrastructure dominated the meetings. The G20 nations deliberated upon the digital infrastructure and also resolved to build and strengthen a strong financial architecture for financial inclusion. The meeting also discussed upon various aspects with regard to multilateralism and geopolitical issues. With cameraman Prabhakar and Ajay Mishra, Aisha Khanam, DD India, Bangalore.
The first session of a G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting was jointly steered by Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and RBI Governor Dr. Shaktikant Das today. The session focused on issues relating to international financial architecture, sustainable finance and infrastructure. The Finance Minister sought views on how multilateral development banks can be strengthened to address shared global challenges of the 21st century while maintaining a focus on sustainable development goals and poverty eradication. The FM highlighted rising debt vulnerabilities in many vulnerable countries and sought views on multilateral coordination while making the point that managing global debt vulnerabilities will be crucial for the world economy. She invited views on policy initiatives that can enable financing for SDGs and mobilize timely and adequate resources for climate finance. The Finance Minister also spoke about India's G20 priority of financing cities of tomorrow and sought views on domestic policy experiences on financing inclusive, resilient and sustainable cities of tomorrow. RBI Governor Shaktikant Das and Chair of the US Federal Reserve Jerome H. Powell exchanged views in Bengaluru. The RBI Governor also met Dr. Thomas Jordan, Chairman of the Governing Board of Swiss National Bank. In an exclusive conversation with DD India's correspondent Ajay Mishra, Infosys Chairman Nandan Nilekani said that India's digital public infrastructure can be a role model for the world to adopt. Mr. Nilekani had moderated a high-level symposium on DPI on the sidelines of the G20 Finance Track meeting. He is the co-chair of India's G20 Task Force on Digital Public Infrastructure for Economic Transformation, Financial Inclusion and Development. Listen in.
We have with us the chairman of Infosys, who actually moderated a high-level symposium on digital public infrastructure. So thank you very much, sir. What was the general sense of the House about India's digital public infrastructure?
I think one thing that has really come out in this G20 is the world beginning to understand and appreciate the sophisticated and comprehensive digital public infrastructure that India has built over the last several years. and there was a lot of appreciation and also a belief that this is a model that could perhaps be used in other countries.
So you also co-chairing a task force on the financial inclusion. What is the way ahead as far as the G20 is concerned?
Yes, I'm co-chairing a digital transformation task force on how to use DPI for governance, technology, efficiency and all that. And that we've just had our first meeting with the committee, and before the end of the presidency we'll have a very comprehensive report to give the road forward.
Okay. Sir, as far as this DPI is concerned, you said that we can be the role model, and Prime Minister also stressed on the fact that it can be a role model. But how it is different from the current or alternate mechanism of public service delivery that we have in the world, and how can we steer forward?
No, I think what we have done with our identity Aadhaar, 1.3 billion people, the world's largest DBT program, the savings we have got, $27 billion in savings from the efficiency, UPI, which is the world's largest payment platform, now with account aggregator, which allow people to use their own data. We're creating a new model of economic growth and inclusion that actually applies to other countries also.
Finally, sir, when it comes to the payment system, we have actually mastered the inclusion part in that. So do you see the UPI being adopted by some other countries going forward, as has been pitched by the Prime Minister itself?
Oh, absolutely. UPI is done by NPCI, which has set up a subsidiary called NPCI Global, and they're talking to many countries around the world. There's tremendous interest. Recently, the Prime Minister, along with the Singaporean Prime Minister, launched the real-time cross-border payment system, so that will go with other countries. So absolutely, UPI will have global implications and benefits.
Thanks very much, and it was a pleasure talking to you, sir. Thank you very much. So the digital public infrastructure is going to be the key, one of the key factors here in G20 finance track meeting in Bangalore. Ajay Mishra, DD India, Bangalore.
And DD India correspondent Aisha Khanam spoke to Richard Sammons, ILO's G20 Sherpa and Director Research in Bengaluru, on how the world views the digital revolution underway in India. Take a listen.
The G20 meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors at Bangalore has set the tone and agenda for the G20 countries to build a strong digital public infrastructure and a financial architecture for financial inclusion. Now, the meeting has set its agenda and the deliberations are underway. To talk more about the deliberations and the policy and how the policy concerns all the G20 nations, I have with me Richard Sammons, who is the Director, Research Department, International Labour Organization, ILO. Thank you for talking to Doordarshan, Mr. Richard. The meeting has set the tone. So how do you see the events unfolding with regard to the fact that digital public infrastructure is an important aspect, and how does ILO look at it?
One has to be very impressed with what India has done, building out its digital public infrastructure, which is such an important enabling technology for people to have access to benefits, to get more access to formal economy types of work and the like. And so, I think what has been done here over the past decade is a showcase for the world, right. And I expect that we'll see some of that tomorrow, because there's a special session of the meeting which provides an opportunity for the minister to see some of the innovation here in India.
Right. And now, how do you see, the digital infrastructure being strengthened? The G20 countries are committed to sustainable development and inclusive development. So, with regard to ILO in the center of these, how do you view this?
Well, the ILO, of course, as the International Labour Organization, is concerned with the world of work. Yes. And that is to say, with the quantity and quality of jobs on the one hand, and the extent and quality or level of coverage of social protection. Exactly. And in fact, digital public infrastructure is highly relevant to both of those areas, because to the extent that people can have a particular identity that is trusted and that has therefore access to banking capabilities, and can therefore more easily get registered and be able to be eligible for benefits from the government, this begins to help to address some of the big challenges that you see in much of the world, which is the large proportion of work in the informal economy.
That was Richard Summons talking about the agenda here at this meeting and how this will unfold in the coming days with regard to the policies, and also how skilled labor and how people can utilize the digital infrastructure, and how this can lead to a better economic growth of all the countries. With cameraman Prabhakar, Aisha Khanam, DD India, Bangalore.
DD India correspondent Aisha Khanam also caught up with the Brazilian ambassador to India, Andre Arjona Correa do Lago, in Bengaluru on India's G20 presidency and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's address to the first meeting of the finance ministers and central bank governors meeting under India's G20 presidency. Take a listen.
The first meeting of the finance ministers and central bank governors is underway at Bengaluru. G20 delegates have been making several deliberations here at Bangalore. To talk more about today's events and today's first day's discussions, I have with me Mr. Andre from he's ambassador of Brazil. So how do you see today's the agenda that unfolded, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi clearly set the tone for this meeting. So the responsibility lies on the shoulders of the G20 countries, to find solutions to this global economy.
Yes, absolutely. I think that it was very clear that the priorities of the Indian presidency are being followed very seriously by the other countries. So India's leadership in these subjects is undeniable. I mean, the efforts of India regarding sustainability and the extraordinary experience of India in digital inclusion are two elements that obviously have a very special meaning for the rest of the world.
Also, the focus is on enhancing the trans-border transactions as well, and also find a solution to the digital infrastructure, the financial architecture. So how do you see the G20 countries contributing to this vision?
Now, I think that the fact that there was this fantastic understanding between India and Singapore in having these transfers, everybody is very impressed, and I think that it shows that technology is now essentially an element for strengthening democracy and for strengthening income of the lower income people. And I think that many people thought technology is like a luxury or whatever. No, technology is what is going to bring more justice.
Thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you. That was the Brazil ambassador talking to Doordarshan, and he stressed upon the fact that finding solutions to empower the last mile delivery and also the financial transactions solutions is one of the focus areas at the G20 meetings here at Bangalore. With cameraman Prabhakar, Aisha Khanam, DD India, Bangalore.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman met Bruno Le Maire, who is the Minister of Economy, Finance and Industrial and Digital Sovereignty, on the sidelines of the first G20 meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors under India's G20 presidency in Bengaluru today, terming international taxation and debt restructuring two of the priorities identified by India's G20 presidency as important for France too. The French finance minister called for a regulation of cryptocurrency in the interest of consumers and global financial stability. Take a listen.
France has been advocating for a regulation of cryptocurrencies for many years, explaining that there is a need to protect the consumers and to protect the financial stability, so we stick to that position.
Today was day 3 of the 4-day G20 Culture Working Group meeting in the ancient city of Khajuraho in the Indian heartland state of Madhya Pradesh. Deliberations concluded on the 4 priority areas of the meeting. Delegates visited the western group of temples, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, on Thursday, and on Saturday morning they will be taken on a jungle safari to the Panna Tiger Reserve, home to a wide range of species of birds and wild animals.
Formal deliberations at the G20 Culture Working Group meeting drew to a close on Friday in Khajuraho, an ancient Indian city known for its magnificent temples and intricate sculptures. Discussions took place on the 4 priority areas identified by India's G20 presidency: protection and restitution of cultural property, harnessing living heritage for a sustainable future, promotion of cultural and creative industries and creative economy, and leveraging digital technologies for protection and promotion of culture. Over 3 days, 25 antiquities repatriated by the Government of India and displayed at the exhibition on Readdress, Return of Treasures, was the centre of attraction for the delegates. The delegates were taken on a tour to the world-famous temples in the city, built between 950 and 1050 AD. By the Chandela dynasty, these temples represent various forms of meditation, spiritual teachings and relationships through stimulating art. The temples are famous for their craftsmanship that consist of splendid demonstrations of fine sculptures and exceptional architectural skill, making them one of the most stunning UNESCO World Heritage Sites in India. Delegates also got to experience India's vibrant cultural diversity through the Khajuraho Dance Festival cultural performances. On Friday, the delegates visited the Adivat Tribal and Folk Art Museum. An ideal place for history lovers, the museum has a rich collection of tribal and folk art and artifacts. The museum offers the visitors a peek into the history of customs and rituals of different tribes in Madhya Pradesh. It houses over 500 tribal antiques, folk paintings, jewelry, masks, terracotta objects, metal craft and bamboo items. One of the most eye-catching artifacts is the magnificent Karma or Kadamba tree, which is an integral part of the Karam festival held in the rainy season.
I think that the priorities that India has set for the G20 Culture Working Group are just of the utmost importance. The G20 countries and guests have come together, and I am here to represent the United States. For us, we agree with India that the #1 priority of this track should be the protection of cultural property, and also the inclusive nature of the cultural economy.
Exhibition that you've mounted here in the venue is a really good way to bring more sensitivity and more knowledge of this issue of restitution of cultural property to a wider audience. And I think one of the things that we need to do is get the word out a little bit more and get more people aware.
Really important to enhance that global cooperation, as well as work on frameworks and mechanisms that can mainstream and make it easier to achieve the 4 priority successes.
For Bangladesh, what is important to us is to enhance cooperation, cross-border cooperation among member states, to promote culture and to preserve culture and heritage, and how we can collectively make a contribution to promote cultural diversity across the globe.
आदरणीय भारत से दोस्तों, आपको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. रूसी हिंदी की दोस्ती जिंदाबाद. जय रूस, जय हिंद.
Delegates from G20 member states, invitee countries, and national and international organizations working in the field of culture participated in the meeting and were served delicacies made from nutritious millets. On Saturday, they were taken on a jungle safari to the Panna Tiger Reserve. The first meeting in Khajuraho will be followed by 3 more meetings of the G20 Culture Working Group in Bhubaneswar, Hampi and Varanasi.
The 4 important topics discussed in the first Culture Working Group meeting in Khajuraho will not only help in promoting the culture of G20 countries, but will help sharing with each others. However, it is true, India has been working very seriously for the last 7 to 8 years on the 4 important topics which was discussed in this meeting. With cameraperson Baldev Mishra, Aditya Srivastav, DT India, Khajuraho.
DT India correspondent Aditya Srivastav spoke to Govind Mohan, Union Secretary at the Ministry of Culture in the Government of India, on all that was agreed upon in the formal sessions of the first G20 Culture Working Group meeting in Khajuraho. Take a listen.
We are with the Secretary of Culture Ministry, Govind Mohan sir. Sir, what are the outcomes of this important meeting?
The biggest outcome is that of the 4 topics that we have chosen for the Culture Working Group track, all 4 found a very strong resonance with the 19 other member states, the 7 other guest countries who have participated, and with the 7 other international organizations and 1 engagement group. So restitution of cultural property, culture and sustainability, digital transformation and culture, and creative industries and culture, all those 4 found a very strong resonance. Besides that, we had bilaterals with a large number of countries. We had bilaterals with Indonesia, with Mauritius, with the United States, with the United Kingdom. We are going to have 2 or 3 more bilaterals with countries like Saudi Arabia. And we have had extensive discussions with organizations like the ICOM, which is the International Council on Museums, the ICROM, which is the International Council on Preservation, and of course the UNESCO, which is the knowledge partner for this G20 and which is supporting us in all the position papers and various negotiations.
So do you feel this meeting set a tone for upcoming meetings?
Oh yes, it did set the tone, and now as maybe you are aware, if not, I should tell you that there will be 3 more meetings of the Culture Working Group. In May we will be meeting in Bhubaneswar. In July we'll be meeting in Hampi, and finally in August the culture ministers will be meeting in Varanasi.
What topics will be discussed in upcoming meetings?
No, see, these are the 4 topics, these are the 4 streams. Now we will go further into them, and one of the big things that we have done is that now we will be doing periodic webinars with them, which will be coordinated by the UNESCO, where we will now talk at the level of the experts.
Thank you so much, sir. Govind Mohan, Secretary of Ministry of Culture, said this meeting is set the tone for upcoming meetings also. With camera person Baldev Mishra, Aditya Srivastav, DD India, Khajuraho.
And both the meetings, the finance ministers and central bank governors meeting and that of the culture working group in Khajuraho will be concluding tomorrow. But we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us on India at G20. Namaskar.
दीप खर्च करो पर दीप देखो कमाई का एक हिस्सा हमेशा बचाना चाहिए लेकिन पार्टी देने से नहीं बचोगे तुम।
हाँ दी, पार्टी मेरी, बजट तुम्हारा।
अच्छा
आरबीआई कहता है
सही वित्तीय बर्ताव करे आपका बचाव।
It's my pleasure and honor to introduce former DG DIA, Lieutenant General Dillon. Thank you so much for talking to us, Sandeep.
Army is a passion, Army is a love affair. Army is a job nahi hai. From Bad Balakot, and Balakot has a history in Indian history, which I mentioned in the book also. The message of the government was very strong and firm that we will hit you inside Pakistan. अगर इतिहास लिखना है, तो किसी को इतिहास बनाना पड़ेगा. Don't miss it. DD Dialogue on DD India with Sakal Bhatt. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Welcome to this very, very special episode of DD Dialogue with me, Sakal Bhatt. And why this is special? Because we are going to have a freewheeling conversation with a man who doesn't need any introduction. We are talking about Lieutenant General KJS Dillon, popularly known as or fondly known as Tiny Dillon. But his body of work as an infantry veteran and his accomplished and highly distinguished career as a soldier is beyond tall. Honor to introduce, in fact, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce former DG DIA, Lieutenant General Dillon. Thank you so much for talking to us, Sandeep. Namaste. How are you doing,
All
sir?
good, always good.
Sir's book, Kitne Ghazi Aaye, Kitne Ghazi Gaye, even before its formal launch, has made headlines. It continues to make headlines for the reason that the book talks about certain, in fact, it demystifies some truths and half-truths about Kashmir conflict, so to say, which is a thing of past, behind the scenes of Pulwama and Balakot and much more. And most importantly, I must tell our viewers, Sir has had multiple tenures in the valley as an officer, and he is known to have brought the soft power of military to resolve the conflict which now is history. Thank you again. I'm going to quickly start with the title which has intrigued one and all. Kitne Ghazi aaye, kitne Ghazi gaye, ye naam kahan se aaya? Where, I mean, what is the genesis?
Ma'am, you were there on that morning of February 2019, immediately after the Pulwama ID blast in the village Pinglana where this operation was going on. You are covering that operation from there.
Yes.
And after that, once we eliminated the module which carried out the Pulwama ID blast within 100 hours, then this press conference happened on 19th of February 2019 morning. And in that press conference, since Ghazi was the code word of the mastermind of Pulwama ID blast, the Pakistani terrorist Kamran of Jaish-e-Mohammed. So there was a lot of buzz in the media for the last 4-5 days, ever since Pulwama blast, that Ghazi has carried out this blast. So in the press conference, a question was asked to me, is Ghazi dead?
Okay.
And Ghazi is a very preferred code word by the Pakistani terrorist. And during my multiple tenures in Kashmir earlier, a lot of terrorists, Pakistani terrorists with the code name of Ghazi, were eliminated by security forces. And when this question was asked, is Ghazi dead? I didn't want to give much credence to the terrorist. So my instant reply was, kitne Ghazi aaye, kitne Ghazi gaye.
So that was impromptu.
Impromptu reply, kitne Ghazi aaye, kitne Ghazi gaye, parwah nahi, don't worry, we are there. And if you look back in the history of India, Muhammad Ghazni se leke aaj tak, any Ghazi who has come to interrupt or intervene or sort of do any damage to India has been eliminated. India stands tall. It stood tall that time, it stands tall today. So that's how the title of the book, Kitne Ghazi aaye, kitne Ghazi gaye.
The widespread appreciation for initiating unconventional, people-friendly operations during your tenure have been widely talked about, and that part of it has been criticized by some quarters as well. But do you think, I mean, that actually cut ice with the people and it gave you results?
Ma'am, as a captain or as a major in a conflict zone or in a counter-terrorist operational area, probably the job of a captain or a major is about 80 to 90% the hard operations. 10 to 20% local operations of bhavna or local meeting with the people, looking after the interest of the awam. But as a co-commander, only 10% of my job was hard operations, mostly on the line of control and in the valley, which was basically being done by captains, majors and the commanding officers. But as a co-commander, 90% of my job was soft power. I was visible face of the Indian Army in Kashmir. And as a nature also, I may give the look of a very hardened, tough soldier. But within, we all soldiers are very, very human. We are family people. We have our emotions. So I use that soft power, appeal to the mothers, and a lot of things change. In fact, somebody already pointed out with me that my Twitter bio.
I was coming to that. Your plunge in social media and your meteoric popularity in social media.
Ma'am,
I mean, did you expect that?
No, I never expected it. Ma'am,
what do you think has clicked?
Ma'am, actually speaking, I was never on social media, and like serving army officers are not supposed to be on the social media. And when I was going to Chinar Corps as Corps Commander in 2019, General Vinod Bhatia, former Director General Military Operations, he asked me if I am on Twitter. I told him no, sir. He said, you must be on Twitter and keep observing people. There are a lot of inputs which you get from Twitter. He said, come on the Twitter even with the pseudo handle and just keep watching. But when I became a Corps Commander and I asked a young officer to open a Twitter account for me.
This was which year?
2019, ma'am.
And now how many followers you have on Twitter?
I have, I think,
it has hit the roof.
More than 3 lakh, ma'am.
That's brilliant.
So when he opened my account, he asked me, sir, what name do you want to give it? He was expecting I'll give some pseudo name. I said, no, write down KJS Dhillon, handle name will be Tiny Dhillon. And he says, sir, this is not allowed. That young officer told me it's not allowed. I said, nothing doing. If as a Corps Commander, 15 Corps, I have to come on social media.